Okay, recording. This is the tutorial on taking Milky Way images with a basic DSLR or mirrorless camera setup. Hey guys, welcome back. We're here tonight. We're going to be teaching you how to shoot a Milky Way shot with a standard or basic DSLR or mirrorless setup. A lot of people are wanting to, I guess, get into astrophotography, and it is one of the hardest sort of genres to master. But with technology these days, cameras are a lot more powerful, and they can definitely get a shot of the Milky Way fairly easily. Now, when it comes to getting a shot of Milky Way, there's pretty much a basic sort of settings you can put your camera on, and you point it at the Milky Way, you'll get a shot easily. Yes, the image, if you zoom in on it, you'll notice that there'll probably be a bit of noise, won't be as crystal clear or as good as those Milky Way shots you might see through the social media outlets and what have you. But what I want to teach you tonight is how you can take a basic DSLR or mirrorless setup. It doesn't have to be expensive, it could be mid-range. Myself, I'm going to be using my Canon M5. It's a crop sensor mirrorless camera that came out a few years ago now. But also I'm using the cheap 22mm f2 lens for the M mount, and which I think in Australian dollars sort of goes for around the $240 to $60 mark at the moment. And it's a cheap little f2 pancake lens. So I think with this camera it's about 35mm range. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a photo of the Milky Way using this setup, basic setup, and we're going to take you through the basic settings, and then I'm going to show you the type and quality of image you can get with doing it with one shot. But then what I'm going to be doing is taking some multiple shots, and then I'm going to take you through, I guess, the process of being able to maybe stack some images to get a better quality image for your Milky Way, but also maybe do some longer exposures for your foreground, so you can sort of clean up those foregrounds as well. And then the third step is maybe then showing you how I can blend that longer exposure for the foreground, blended with this multiple stacked image of the sky, and once you put it all together you can get a pretty good clean image throughout, just using a basic DSLR or mirrorless setup. So with that said, I've got the Milky Way getting closer and closer, rising now over my shoulder. So what I'll do is when you see me next, we'll be in front of the computer. I'll take you through the images that I'm going to take with this with the M5, and we can go through the different steps, and I'll show you what you can actually achieve. But I'll just quickly run you through the settings. We'll jump into the back of my camera. I'll show you the settings that I'm going to be using, and then from there we'll head back to the computer to put it all together. All right, so I've got my settings set up here. As I said, I've got my 22mm on, an APS-C sensor, gives me equivalent of about 35mm. So once I've done my my calculations for my shutter speed, as you can see, I've picked 10 seconds. Reason I've picked 10 seconds is because what you do is you'll have to divide. What I do is divide 400 by the focal length. So if you divide 400 by 35, I think it's like 11 seconds essentially, or a bit over 11 seconds. Fractionally. So I've dialed it into 10, and that's to really make sure I don't get any star trails, and I do get the sharpest stars I can. F2 on the lens, I'll just have it wide open. I personally don't normally do that, but because we've got such a small lens, and we are shooting on APS-C, I want to let as much light in as I can to counteract my shutter speed. And I've got the ISO sitting on 6400. So that's my basic settings for my camera and lens setup that I've got now. So the only thing that changes, we're going to turn that back on, camera's gone a bit quiet. The only thing I would change normally would be the shutter speed and aperture, depending on the lens and also camera that I'm using when it comes to shooting my astro shots. But that's pretty much a basic setup. I want to point out though, I've got my white balance here. I've got my white balance custom set to 4,500. I am shooting in RAW, and I do recommend that you do shoot in RAW. You can shoot in JPEG, but you'll get definitely more control of editing your photos using RAW. But I've picked 4,500 because it's the white balance I personally sort of like straight out of camera when I'm shooting. You can use auto white balance and fix it later in post, but that's what I usually set my cameras at, is 4,500. But when it comes to setting, that's about it really. And you pretty much just got to have your settings like that. Make sure that your lens is focused and you've got it in manual focus, and then you shoot your shot. So what I'll do now is I'll shoot my frames. I'll get a single shot. I'll get my multiple shots of the same composition, and then once I've done that, I'll do some long exposures at a lower ISO. So I might bring the ISO down to like 800, which is like about 3 stops. 3 stops darker. So by doing that, I'll then have to increase my shutter speed by 3 stops, which will counteract me dropping my ISO down so low. So I can get a similar exposure but a lower ISO. So if I've dropped my ISO down there, I might want to go for a little bit longer to get a bit more brighter sort of a shot for my foreground. But yeah, I'll play with those settings. I'll get the shots and we'll chuck them in Lightroom and Photoshop, and I'll go through what to do when processing your images with your that you've taken with your basic DSLR or mirrorless camera. All right guys, I'll see you back on the computer. All right guys, we're back here in the computer after a fairly successful night of shooting. Got all my frames after getting, I guess, a few interruptions from passing cars. But you know, that can happen, especially when you go to popular places to shoot. That's why I like to go to isolated places. So we took a whole series of images of the Milky Way core rising. I'm going to show you what a one-shot image looks like, and I'm going to show you what then a stacked image looks like. So what we did is we've taken multiple images. I think I've taken about 13 or 14 different shots of the Milky Way, and I'm going to stack all those shots together. I've got special software which is called Starry Landscape Stacker, and that's for Mac, Sequator if you're a PC user. And what it does is it lines up all your Milky Way images by finding all the stars and images and lines them all up and stacks for noise reduction. Because the reason why this is so powerful is that noise in your images when shooting at high ISOs is actually random. It's never exactly the same. So when you stack your multiple images, more images usually the better, it cancels out noise and helps to give more data to the overall image, and you get a cleaner image after doing so. So I've got my series of images for the sky, but I've also taken images for my foreground, for my foreground. So I've taken the one long exposure image. So here is one shot of my sky. So if you zoom in, it's very, very noisy. If I zoom back out and you have a look at the dark foreground here, and if I boost the exposure, it's just horrendously gross, terrible. So that's why we are going to take another shot for our foreground, a longer exposure. So if I reset that, I've got multiple exposures for my sky. I've got my foreground image here. So if you zoom in, as you can see, it's not as noisy, but if I boost up the exposure, I can retain much more detail, and there's a cow there, by I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it's much better, much cleaner, and easier to work with. So with a little bit of noise reduction, I can remove a bit more noise out of that image as well. So blending both this foreground image with a stacked sky image and doing some edits, the whole image as a whole is going to come together. So so that's the plan. So here's your one image. If you're happy with that, you can do your little tweaks to it by, you know, introducing contrast. You might want to bring out exposure a little bit, boost up your vibrance, get rid of that color cast a little bit, and then, you know, do a bit of clarity boost, which helps with the gas clouds and the gas lanes in the Milky Way core. And, you know, you might be happy, you might want to make your sky a little bit warmer, you want to make it a little bit cooler. I don't mind making it a little bit cooler. That's me personally. I just feel that that feels more natural, because I guess most light out in space is UV light, and what we see is, because they are little suns essentially, all the stars, and they produce UV light like our sun. So I find it just to cool it down, because UV light is quite cool. But yeah, that's a one-shot image. I don't want to make this video go for too long, so what we'll do is I've exported all my sky images and my long exposure images out into their own folder, and having them ready to be stacked. So what we'll do is we'll go and do that now. I'll switch over to Starry Landscape Stacker, and I'll show you how to use that to be able to stack your images. Alright, so here we are in Starry Landscape Stacker. As soon as you open it, it gives a drop-down box to select your images. I would select all of my images here and here and here, and go open. And now it's going to open up all 14 images, and it's going to stack them together and line them up for me. So it's just going to open those up quickly, and then it's going to show a whole heap of red dots, and it's going to try and pick all the stars, as you can see, all the stars in my image. And what I'd like to do after doing this, you get to use your own cursor here, and you get to place any stars that may have missed. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually trace the horizon of the image and sort of help it distinguish where the sky is and the foreground. Because what it's going to do is it's going to mask out the sky, so when it stacks my images together, it knows where the sky is and how and where to stack all the Milky Way images together, so we can get our noise-free sky. So I'll just speed this recording up a bit. Okay, so now we put all our dots on our sky, and we've sort of outlined the horizon. We can push find sky, and then now the software is going to try and find the sky, which has done a pretty good job. It's even found a little bit of sky in between those trees where I put the red dot, and I can now paint in the bits that it's missed up around the edges here by painting those in. So now I've got a perfect mask of the sky, and now I can either choose one of my images that I want the software to stack all the images together on, using that one as the main one. But I like to just do align and composite, because it will usually just use your last image and then align the rest of them with it. So it'll just do that now quickly. Okay, so now it's finished stacking the image together, and now it gives me an option to how to stack. If I hit this drop down menu, you've got min horizon noise, min horizon star dupe. I'm not sure what some of those mean, but I've found that the mean min horn noise is a good one. So what I'll do is I'll just select that one again. You can also save a copy of the mask when you're finished to help out with some photo editing later on in Photoshop, but for today's tutorial I don't need that, so I'll just push save, and it gives me my basic little output here, which I've already saved. So what I'll do is I'll cancel out of that, and we'll head over into Photoshop so I can show you the stacked image of the sky. And then after I've shown you that, we'll edit it quickly and show you some of the edits that we'll do, and then also blend in the foreground image as well. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. So this is if I go down here, select that off, that is our stacked image. So if I zoom in now and push the actual right button and go back a bit, this is a now pretty much noiseless image. There is still probably a little bit of noise, but overall in total there's really nothing here. So I just need to zoom out, but that is our sky layer,
We do have some issues with the stars up in the corner here, but that's what you get for using, I guess, a cheaper lens. But I've done some basic edits with some color correction, curves and vibrance. So if I just click that on, that's what I came out with my sky. I won't go through how I did that. As I said, if you know how to use a Photoshop and how to do coloring and stuff like that, then you'll know how to do your layers and different sort of adjustments using curves and vibrant sliders and what have you, and brushing things in. But I'll quickly click them off. So this is just, I did a curves adjustment. As you can see, it's just made the Milky Way core and dust lanes a bit more punchy. Then I did a little bit of color correction, cooled it down a bit and added a little bit more magenta to the overall image. Then I went back and did another curves adjustment just to brighten the sky a bit, and then added in some vibrance just to give it a little bit more punch in the color, to make it a bit more appealing. So, and that's pretty much where I'd leave it for my sky. I can do more aggressive editing, but being a basic camera, I could definitely take it further, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'll leave it. So that was that. Now, if I turn this on, so here's my foreground. I've just added my foreground down here in the bottom. What I've done is you can see this, if I turn, can I shift? Yeah, so here's my foreground. What I've done is I've put this layer, this picture, my foreground image, and I've put that on top of my sky, and then I've blacked it out so it's I guess not visible to me. But then I've used a white brush and then painted in the bottom part of the sky. Like I said, I'm not going to take you through a Photoshop tutorial on how to do that. That might be something I might do later on in another video, but there's plenty of videos on how to use layer masks and stuff for Photoshop. But I did do some color corrections and exposure adjustments for my foreground. So I just wanted to cool down the foreground so it sort of matches I guess a nighttime feel. I don't want it to feel like it's during the day and have a warm light on it. So did that and just brightened it up a little bit. And then once I had done those adjustments, I then just blended it in with my sky to give this final image. And then which makes it more pleasing. So when I blended it, you might see that it's a bit brighter here in the middle and in the foreground, and then as you get up to the top of the peaks, the hills, it is still darker. And that's just to replicate more like what the eye would see. You're going to be able to see closer to you rather than further away, and it just has a great bit more of a gradual light fall off into the distance to give it a bit more of a more natural look. I've kept vignette. I didn't do any lens corrections. I don't mind a vignette on my photos. It just depends sometimes. If I do star trails, I'll get rid of the vignette. But when doing a Milky Way core image and it's front and center, I like to keep the vignette in there just to help frame the whole image. But essentially that's it. That's now your final image using a long exposure for your foreground, stacked Milky Way for the sky, and then blended together to give you a final image, which is that there. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed it. That was just a quick overview on how to capture your images using a basic mirrorless or DSLR camera. Then just going through some of the ways of how to use those images. So whether you're happy with a one-shot image and just doing some basic edits, I think if you did do that and you shared it through your social media channels, it's going to look fine. But if you want to take it just a little step further and start stacking some images, as I said, Starry Landscape Stacker or Sequator for PCs is great to use to get more detail and cleaner sky images. I will leave some links down below to some of my, I guess, favourite other YouTubers that have done some tutorials on those softwares, because I don't think that I'll be bringing anything like that out in the near future, so I'll link to those. But then also blending your foreground with your sky image. is also very powerful now to get a clean foreground in with your sky image. And it was extremely basic little brush in using some layers in Photoshop, so nothing fancy schmancy about that. So, and then posting that up on Instagram will be will look fantastic, and I think everyone will be very pleased with an image like that after spending like maybe an hour out under the stars. So, all right, well, I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope everyone out there can go out and try and capture an image like that. And if you've got any questions about the video, if I didn't explain anything clearly, I do apologise. You can leave a comment down below and I'll answer that for you. You can always get in contact with me via my Instagram as well at Joel Stafford Photo. But if you do like content like this and you want to learn more about astrophotography, please hit that subscribe button. And yeah, I look forward to making another video soon. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next one.
I've got the settings pretty much dialed in now, and I'm going to cut short because I think there's a car coming. And I swallowed a bug. Oh, okay, let's start that again. Oh, there's a car coming now, behind me. Jesus. Told ya, busy, busy, busy. Try and come somewhere quiet, and yeah, too populated here at Lake Mugra. It's not my most favourite place to have to come, but it's the easiest. Oh, we gone out.